Comrades, friends, brothers and sisters, it is an incredible honor and a very special privilege for me to have the opportunity to share with you tonight the life, the story, and the history of Umagogo, a story that unites, inspires, and encourages us to serve those who we are meant to respond to. Magogo had clearly shown us that her life was about love, service, and leadership, because ultimately there can be no leadership if there is no service. And that must be the enduring lesson that we take away from her life, because that's what she calls us to do. She reminds us that we must not do an act in service of others as an act of charity only. We must do that because we realize that our interest and our futures and our long-term survival is intricately linked together. So we have to build a country, a community, and a family that responds to the needs of all of our people. And so tonight we come together to pay tribute to her and to make sure that we find ways in which we can emulate the incredible life journey that she's brought to our attention. I was asked to talk about what's happening in South Africa, what it is that workers have done, and families and communities. Families are probably the building block of our society because it's built on bonds of blood. But that blood bond is only the foundation of ensuring that we establish the way that we relate to each other in a new way, that those value systems that enshrines and that we promote in our families, that sense of goodness that we put in children, that's what we want to see manifesting itself throughout our communities. And tonight when we talk about families, it is probably most fitting to talk about the Masalela family. What an incredible story. A story of service, a story of a people who were committed to the most noble of causes to overcome the horrors of apartheid. We don't need to be told about the horrors of apartheid because we lived through that. We felt its isolation, its marginalization, how we tortured and murdered people. It was a brutal system that cast a terrible spell over our communities. When we come together today, it's to realize that that system of apartheid was not only about white people disliking black people. It was in effect a system of accumulation. It was the grand theft of apartheid. It was the legal architecture that was required to take all from us and give us nothing in the interest of those who came to colonize our land. It is not very different to what we see the colonial state doing in the Middle East at the moment. And that's why, as part of the community of nations, we speak out against all forms of discrimination and wherever that kind of apartheid rears its head. Reading the book tells you a story about people who not only demonstrated their love to our communities, but how they were able to reach out beyond just themselves and their own personal ambitions to make sure that we undo the terrors and the horrors of apartheid that teared apart our families and tore apart our communities. And so that's what we call to respond to. And that story of the Masalelas is the story of all of our families. All of our families went through that incredible difficulties that was confronted by the effects of apartheid. But the Masalelas were exceptional in the way they responded to those challenges. Not only did they shed their family blood for our liberation, but they ensured that they could create an environment where others who felt that we needed to overcome the burden of apartheid could give expression to their ambitions to be liberation fighters. And so the Masalelas created an environment where comrades could come through, they could be nurtured, and they could be reinforced with the solidarity of people who shared not only a common bond, but a common dream for what our country should look like. And that's the exceptionalism of the family that we're celebrating tonight, and Umagogo who brought that to our attention. Those conditions that they created for others to live out their most desperate desires to free our country of the horrors that they denied us, our very sense of community, that has to be both saluted and emulated in all the walks of life that we have. And it's that family that brings us together tonight. And like all families, their cultures, their customs, their traditions are often most informed by the matriarchs and the patriarchs. And in this instance, Gogo was exceptional in the way that she was able to unite us. Because even though we came from different strands of the liberation movement, our liberation dream was the same. Our ambition for South Africa of the future was the same, and it resided in the hearts of all of our people. And so there were no distinctions drawn between the political parties, because ultimately, as liberation fighters, all of us, irrespective of what organizations we belong to, we must come together to realize the dreams that we promised our people. And it's that sense of community that it's that sense of family that fed into the communities and what communities can do. Communities are driven by values and customs, but those values and customs arise from the better nature of human beings. Those private virtues that makes us good people, that's what brings us to fight against any injustice that presents itself both in our world and in our experiences, but also anywhere else where injustice raises its ugly head. Our responsibility is to make sure that we confront those. And there's no doubt that we confronted it in South Africa, both in the respect of building that liberation community that included all of the arms of the liberation movement, including the trade union movement, and many of the sacrifices, the struggles, and the huge price that was paid by workers to make sure that today we can enjoy a democratic South Africa. But the community that was built around number 43 was as important as the community, because that support that was engendered from 43 provided people with an opportunity to make sure that we could respond to the challenges differently. I'd want to say that Gogo's act to make sure that everyone was welcome at 43 was in itself a profoundly political action. And it's a political action that we must learn from. It doesn't matter what the color of our sweaters are. Our desire to build a better life for our people must be what drives us, and that must be the overriding consideration in everything we do to make sure that the promises we made our people are realized. Now, those lessons that we've learned, those values that we were taught by those who went before us, those are important because they represented the building blocks of the liberation promise to our people. And the liberation promise was probably most effectively captured in the Freedom Charter. And if I may take a moment, I want to take one or two of the key clauses of the Freedom Charter and examine both how the struggle as it unfolded in South Africa, in Swaziland, and in all of the other areas where our people manifested their unhappiness with the deep, deep horrors of apartheid. Those liberation aspects that are included in the Freedom Charter that probably stands out most strongly is the fact that the doors of learning and culture will be open to all. That's what we told our people liberation will look like. We told our people that the land will be shared by those who work it. That was the liberation promise, because that's what was the social injury that confronted our people. And finally, we said that the wealth of this wonderfully rich country will be shared by all of our people. So those were the liberation promises that we made to our people, and that realization of the Freedom Charter would unite our people, would undo the legacy of apartheid, and would provide everybody with the opportunity to be the best that they can be. That was no small promise, and we have made great strides in the respect of that. Too often when we come together, we reflect on those who have nothing else to do in the respect of their contribution to our country, but to criticize those who have put their shoulders to the wheel. We must take a moment to remind ourselves that we have done much in our country. We have built more than 2 million people 2 million houses across the length and breadth of our country for all of our people. We've made sure that electricity and water collections are above 80%. And then we've made sure that black economic empowerment and transformation in all areas of our society, that was significantly advanced. But the challenges remain, and there is much to be done by all of us and the generations that will come after us. But we need for a minute to see what the differences are between the promises we made to our people and the realizations that we've achieved. On the area of education, have we opened the doors of learning and culture for all of our people? Sadly not. They are the children in the townships who have education facilities that are far inferior to the children in the old Model C schools. And then what we do to compound that problem is we take the brightest children from the township schools and we take them out of those schools and put them in the ex-Model C schools. That is great for that child, but it's not great for the environment. When what we should be doing is keeping the best amongst us, so that they can serve as an inspiration for the other children. I make this point only to say that we need to relook at how effectively our changes have been and what the consequences of thereof have been. In the area of land reform, to ensure that those who work the land can own it, we now know that there's legislation in front of the court, in front of the parliament, 30 years later, to finally deal with the area of expropriation in a much more refined way. The most damning feature of our society today is the fact that South Africa today is a more unequal society than it was in 1994. Now that must be a clear indication to us that the trajectory that we put our country on has not been realized, and there's a lot of work to be done to ensure that we get it back on track. But the greatest scourge, without any doubt, affecting all sectors of our community is the scourge of corruption. And I want to say that corruption at first manifested itself in the private sector. There was collusion in bread prices, in steel prices, in chicken prices, in the construction of the stadium, and collusion's just a fancy word for the corruption that exists amongst corporations. In China, if you're guilty of collusion, you'll probably be put to death. Here, the company is guilty of collusion, their CEO's got a fine, and they raise the prices of bread the next day so that the poor who they'd exploited effectively paid that fine. This tells us that in spite of our best effort as patriotic South Africans, there are those who came before, who accumulated under apartheid, who clearly has not have a change of heart, and they are not committed to do the right thing. So we must know who is on our side and who does not share our interests and our ambitions for all of the people in our country. And that's got to be a key consideration. The other area of the private sector that probably stands out above all else is the Steinhoff issue. Close on to 280 billion rand was misappropriated. We're probably not going to see that money again. That money was lost from poor workers' pension funds and different areas of investment. And what's happened? The person guilty for that has now claimed to have shot himself at the beach, at the bottom of his holiday house, but nobody can tell us that they've seen the body. We've seen in South Africa how too many dead people disappear. The Watson fellow who made the accident at the airport, nobody saw his body to say that we can identify and he was the problem. Clearly there's a lot to be done because the levels of corruption in our institutions has to be responded to. How is it that we can bring a body from outside a prison into a prison and that facilitates the escape of Thabo Bester? The levels of corruption that must exist there is something that must frighten us. But what we've got to do is to respond to the private sector corruption in a much more forceful way. The public sector corruption, we know and we've seen it, and that is probably the worst kind of corruption because that's stealing from poor people. Besides the theft of that, besides the loss of money and all of the implications where the Eskom is affected by it or Transnet on the rest of the economy, the worst thing that the corruption of the state does is it steals the sense of hope from the people we are meant to lead. That's the worst crime of corruption. So clearly, we must undo that And we must make sure that the spirit of Magogo, that spirit of servant leadership, of not wanting to enrich yourself at the cost of others, that's the spirit that drives us. And when we come here today, is to remind ourselves that this is what we want to do, and this is where our country should be going. How we should ask, does a family and a community affect the nation we want to build? Well, the first thing it does is it unites our people around a set of common values that is absolutely essential. It makes sure that the dreams that we share about a better life for ourselves and our children, that is realized in the way that we're building our society. And it's also given expression in the democratic elections. I know that we are all frustrated with the elections, and the fact that the electorate are staying away from elections more than those people nearly are voting is a signal to us that we may be losing the confidence of our people, and there's a need to go back to the old ways that we did. How do we go back to doing that? We've got to make sure that we take the private virtues, those essential goodness that exist in people's heart, those values that we teach children in our families, we must ensure that that essential goodness, that private virtues becomes the public values of our societies, our communities, and our nation. And that public values that we all hold dear, that must be encapsulated in the laws of the country so that it represents our public policy. We must talk in public policy about the need to be generous, to be considerate, to be empathetic about those that have less than us, and to prioritize their needs. But that nearly needs a clear indication of the kind of public policy we need. Unfortunately, though, some of our public representatives have found it more urgent to fill their pockets than to realize the needs of the Freedom Charter. And that's something that we must ensure we address as a matter of urgency, because that's the main reason that leads to the reality of why people are moving away from the African National Congress and moving away from the democratic project in our country. People do not fight for the ideas in our heads. They fight to improve their life circumstances. They fight to provide opportunities for their families and to build a better society where all of us can realize our ambitions. What we've done as this community of people, by allowing many of these abhorrent practices to take place, is that we've essentially given some amongst us the license to waste the democratic dividend. The fact that there was such a hype in 1994, the people who had paid with their lives for our democracy, those who were committed to lay down their lives to make sure we make the opportunities for all of our people better, those were the people that we entrusted to lead and to take us forward, to connect with that. But now we know that we have lost their trust, and we must set about rebuilding that trust. The question remains, how do we do it? One of the main ways, in my view, that we can do it is that Magogoism is an important vehicle to do that. Because what that calls us to do is to engage our people and to ensure that we serve their needs, that we become the servants that we promised them when we were elected to leadership. Because we must make sure that the fact that we talk about softening the social injury, the fact that children go and sleep without food, that they have less than adequate education, that we don't have effective housing for all of our people, those social ills must be addressed. And what Number 43 has done, what your efforts by association to Number 43 and your commitment to that common set of values have done, is it presents a vehicle that we can use to make sure we again reconnect with our communities and rebuild the trust that we've lost. Because ultimately this country works only if it works for all of our people. If it doesn't work for all of our people, then the fruits of the failure will become all of our problem. And we must make sure that we respond to that with the urgency that is required. What is to be done? I talk to the issue about what is to be done from the perspective of working families. Those workers in the unions that struggled and sacrificed and made sure that they contributed to challenging the apartheid government and removing the economic power, the ability to assert the economic power. So in this new environment, what do we do? Amongst the first things that we must do is to stabilize our democracy. And how we stabilize that democracy is in a variety of ways. The Government of National Unity and the Declaration of Intent provide some opportunities and many challenges. It's not the discussion for tonight, but we certainly must make sure that those things doesn't take us further away from our ability to serve our people and undo the legacy of apartheid. We must build the kind of accountability in government that we promised our people in the Freedom Charter and at the first election when Nelson Mandela spoke to our people. Then we've got to deepen transformation. Though great strides have been done in realizing transformation, but a lot more must be done, and we must use the state and the energies of our people to do that. What are the great achievements that have happened so far? The Employee Share Ownership Scheme has seen more than 500,000 workers get shares in more than 120 companies, and that shares amount to a value of 70 billion rand. Last year, they were paid out 3 billion rand in dividends. Now, this is what's possible if we have the political will. Why is it only true that we were able to put in place those measures in the last 5 years? Why is it only in the main with multinational companies? A lot more must be done, but clearly we've seen that the road is possible if we demonstrate the political will and the urgency to respond to the needs of our people. We're also talking about the fact that in future, the huge challenge of governance that we have in our country, that the boards of many, many companies, that they will include representatives of workers. And that goes to the question of everybody being included in all of the decisions that are taken, not only in the public life, but also in corporations, because corporations are not a power unto themselves. Often, they make money on the basis of the investments that are made from our pension funds, and so there must be a level of accountability to those people who made the investments, and we must hold them to an account that ensures they respond more ethically to the challenges in our country. The notion about an industrial democracy, this notion that the President often talks about, we've got to ensure that we deepen that. Already we're making great strides in master plans. There's about 25 different master plans where business, labor, government, and in some instances community have come together, and they've said this is how those industries must be restructured to make sure that they respond to the needs of our people. What is the threat if we don't restructure those industries effectively? We see it in agriculture at the moment. People are still employed under horrendous conditions of farms, and they're given the minimum of basic services on those farms. We must respond to that. The wages are too low, the conditions rob people of their dignity, but what we do as a country for farms and for agriculture is immense. When we enter into a trade agreement, whether it's at the World Trade Organization, in bilateral agreements with the Americans or the Europeans, they give us market access for agricultural products, which benefits farmers, and we have to make concessions in other areas of the economy. But the farmers never end up making concessions to ensure that farm workers' lives are also improved. And so that's got to be a condition of us securing as a country trade agreements that gives them greater market access and improves their levels of profitability. The greater equality that's required in our society is something that must be tackled as a matter of urgency, because it probably represents one of the biggest threats in our communities. In Swaziland, all of the work that was done there with South Africans, what that started to tell us is that any solution for Swaziland, for South Africa, for Angola, for Mozambique, has to be included in a regional solution. So the African Continental Free Trade Agreement is an incredible path towards greater regional integration and building an economy that responds to the needs of African people. Put in place a development plan for Africa that has special features that responds to the needs of Africans. For too long, we're having to duplicate everything that happens in developed countries that is not serving the needs of our people if we look at what the clear indicators are at the moment. And then we've got to deal with international issues. The unipolar world where the United States wreak havoc across the globe, both fostering wars and actively being part of wars in many parts of the globe, is something that we must address. So BRICS and the establishment of a multipolar order where there's a counterbalancing force to the brutality of the United States, that must be an important part of our work. But what I'm trying to say is that the struggles that we waged at a local, at a regional, and at an international level, that must translate into benefits and solutions to the problems that exist in those areas. For me, when I read the book about Magogoism, and I read about how the different areas of the struggles that we confronted are interrelated, it makes the point clear that our response to these challenges must also be an integrated response. And finally, the point that I want to make is that we do need to find a different financial architecture for the globe. How is it that we can be prescribed that any oil you want to buy, you must buy in dollars because of an old agreement between the United States and some of the oil supplying countries in Arabia? So that agreement's coming to an end, and soon the de-dollarization, where Russia and China and other countries buy stuff from each other without first converting to dollars, is going to pose a massive crisis for the United States. But that just means that the opportunities for building a more just world, like we've had the opportunities to build a more just South Africa and Africa, is something that we've got to urgently grab, and we've got to give it the kind of urgency that ensures that the benefits accrue to our people as soon as possible. We must ensure that these issues that we've identified, that the possibilities to achieve them is brought about. We know without doubt it's not going to happen overnight, but the one thing that we do want to see is that the trajectory of implementing those things must always be towards greater social justice. We can't have a circumstance where the rules of the world, the rules of the big and the powerful, are the rules that we have to embrace, and we are disadvantaged by it. So that's got to be a key part of what we respond in going forward. But how do we build this new society? How do we take the lessons from 43 Travali? How do we take the teachings and the life lessons from Umagogo to ensure that it guides us in what we do? I think the first thing we must do is to appreciate that individuals are the indispensable agents of change. And that means that as powerful as Umagogo was, as powerful as many other individuals was in shaping the direction that our country takes and the urgency with which it embarks on that journey, that we do that too, that we have that same urgency, because we have that responsibility as people who are part of this incredible initiative to emulate this example elsewhere. And so we're thankful to Magogo and all that she's done and the lessons that she's imparted to the family, because without doubt, every one of these family members, having read each of their stories and having seen earlier tonight, that Comrade Elias was teared up when he spoke to our sister over there about the passing of her dear mother at the last event. That just makes one point clear to me, that revolutionaries are guided by great feelings of love. And even though we don't have state power, we have love and regard for our people. And that's more than enough to change the circumstances that they find themselves in. That's more than enough to confront the rich and the powerful who only seek to look after their own interests. That's enough for us to build this world that we promised our people in the Freedom Charter. So the Masalela story, with all its heartaches, with all its challenges, but with its great achievements and wonderful victories, is a testament to our people and a microcosm of what happened in our country. There's a life lesson that can serve not only to inspire us, but also give us the building blocks of how we go about interceding and making things better without necessarily having all the power to do that. And that's the challenge that we're confronted with now. We've come together to celebrate an incredible family, an incredible matriarch. And what we want to do is to make sure that as we come together and celebrate the achievements in our country and the sense of commitment to this better South Africa that continues to bring us together, that the lessons that we must build on is to ensure that we emulate the life of Umagogo and build a better life for all of our people, but do it with the urgency of now. Thank you very much.
Not in my wildest dream did I think what happened in number 43 Chiloli Park could be expanded in its interpretation to economic development, your commitment and dedication to that, to regional integration, that what starts at that family level can translate to how, as neighbors, countries, not only as communities and villages, could, interact to our welfare and our economic development. Thank you very much. There's a video of his interview in Cape Talk, remember, a year ago.
I'm sorry, I don't.
We are getting old. Where he relates on what the qualities of good leadership are. He also spoke about cannabis, by the way, but we won't talk to that. Qualities of good leadership, economic integration, issues of, okay, I remember the cannabis is coming more than any other discussion. But the passion that you reflected that, watch it, it's about 30 minutes on Cape Talk. It was an interview we had there on Cape Talk. And it also links quite well with what you spoke to today. Thank you very much. I'd like you to remain on here for 5 more minutes and call Lucky Maslela. Please come to, for you follow Maslela. Elias, you follow as well. There's a token of appreciation that I'd like him to bestow on you. And then you call me as who appreciate
Okay. I thought Zweli was going to show this video clip, but again, we continue with the tradition of recognizing people who have been part of us, who have made a difference to our family and to our lives. And not only the Masilela family, but also to all the extended members of our family. So, Tony, we walked this morning, afternoon, and you had a notebook. You kept that notebook. And I could see that you were worrying, and then there was a moment where you were panting up and down like a tiger. And you were preparing for something beautiful. And thank you for this presentation this evening. Thank you so much. And yes, and on behalf of the house, the Masilelas, the extended family, we want to give you this token of appreciation. Yesterday and today, I still said to my younger brother, "Ikhiphe le nto lena." I want you to see it, what it is. My fingerprints are on it now. This is what it is. And this is for you to keep and treasure. Enjoy. Thank you very much. Thank you, Lucky. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
I'll put it back in here, and then I will ask Umalum Elias to come up. Thank you. I'm following on the tradition of these young kids who call us Malum, you know. Malum Elias, please come up. Thank you very much. I can do it.
Yeah, I think so.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Oh, by the way, you still need a digital economy master plan. Of all the master plans you listed, that one is missing. Maslen, I've done your job as well. Yeah, of course.
I'm not sure what's happening, but I thought this award was for Toldi. Why are you hanging on to it?
I like it.